Hello, welcome to video. And if you're listening to the podcast, I recommend actually just going to video and watching. You can see the material I go over, but you can listen as well too if you want. So you go to the description below. There is a Google Drive link to this PDF, interactive PDF that you see here. I highly recommend it. So anytime you see the cursor turn to a hand, it's a link. Alrighty. So I'm going over why Eusebius is not a credible source. I think that the problem I'm seeing, and so I'm going to be going over Book 3, Chapter 1. It's titled, Part of the World Where Christ was Preached by the Apostles. And so I quote only a portion of it, basically the second half of Chapter 1. Peter appears to have preached through Pontus, Galatia, Bithynia, Cappadocia, and Asia to the Jews who were scattered abroad. He finally came to Rome and was crucified with his head downward, having requested himself to suffer in this way. Why should we speak of Paul, spreading the gospel of Christ from Jerusalem to Illyricum, and finally suffering martyrdom at Rome under Nero? This account was given by Origen in the third book of the Exposition of Genesis. All right, end quote. I believe, I want to give credit where credit due. I believe Eusebius is correct. This was referring to the Jewish Christians who were scattered from Jerusalem, which were the stick of Joseph, not the stick of Judah. The stick of Joseph were the Jews came to Christ who were scattered throughout the Roman Empire. And the stick of Judah were the Jews came to Christ who were in Jerusalem where the temple was. However, Peter could not have gone far from Jerusalem to preach the gospel given task of John 21. The disciples had the freedom to go out further than Peter. Most likely Peter, keep in mind, Peter was chief of the apostles, just makes sense that he would stay at Jerusalem. So if we look at these passages, so 1 Peter 1:1, says strangers scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia. Okay, those 5 areas. They were in what we now call Asia Minor. If you remember Galatians 2:7, he is Peter was the one signed the gospel of the circumcision, the Jews, right here in Galatians 2:7. So Peter was an apostle to the Jews. On the other hand, Paul was an apostle to the Gentiles. All right, so keep that in mind. And then if we go to 1 Peter 2:12, having your conversation, okay, who you're referring to, honest among the Gentiles. That is a big clue right there. It's the Jews. Conversation honest among the Gentiles. All right, so that is 1 Peter 2:12. So Peter, an apostle of circumcision, per Galatians 2:7, was writing to the Jewish Christians in those 5 churches. So I just gave you the clues right there. He's not writing Gentiles. If he's writing Gentiles, then 1 Peter 2:12 make no sense. And how are they, in 1 Peter 1:1, how are they scattered if he's writing to Gentile Christians? Scattered from where, So it's clear that when we put all this together, Peter writing from Jerusalem, and he's writing to the 5 Jewish Christians, the 5 churches who were scattered away from Jerusalem. Alrighty, there's nothing in the Bible suggests that Peter had ever gone far away from Jerusalem. All right, according to the scriptures. I'm reading the scriptures. Sorry. So, So continuing on. The rest of the disciples had the freedom to go out further than Peter. Most likely, Peter had known them, the 5 churches that were in Asia that he wrote to during Pentecost, during their annual feast, where they went to Jerusalem, the stick of Joseph, the Jews who came to Christ, who were outside, who were scattered, around the Roman Empire. They went to Jerusalem during the annual feast. So Acts 2:5, for example. So let's look at Acts 2:5. And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. This is not Gentiles. This is an important verse because a lot of Christians, they seem to think that only Gentiles were of every nation. But this is telling you right here that it's Jews. And the Gentiles were not on the scene yet. They were not even on their radar yet, not until 8 chapters later in Acts 10. The Cornelius household was introduced for the first time to the gospel, which changed the course of history, which is a huge day. Very big deal. Alrighty? And of course, I have here John 21. I mentioned John 21 here. So you click on that. You can read where Peter basically, let's see here. Yeah, so feed my lambs. Okay. Actually, this is not a good translation. Just the King James Version here. It's 15 and 17 is where it correctly translated is feed my lambs, feed my sheep. But in verse 16, it's actually shepherd my sheep, okay? What's going on here, we're going from the physical to the spiritual. So remember earlier on, Peter pulled in the net, the fish. That's physical, obviously. So then Jesus said, feed my lambs, okay? So Peter being a fisherman, feed my lambs, it's physical, he just pulled the fish. Now we're transitioning to spiritual. And again, this is a bad translation. In verse 16, it's actually shepherd my sheep. You should look in the Greek, it's shepherd my sheep. Now we're getting the spiritual, okay? And then the third verse, feed my sheep again, which is spiritual. We're going from physical to spiritual, all right? So anyway, if Peter was in Rome, as he wrote for Peter, this would make him amongst the scattered as well. Wouldn't this make him amongst the scattered as well, since the Jewish church centered around Jerusalem where the temple was, not Rome? So if Peter is writing from Rome, well, Rome is away from Jerusalem. It's scattered. If you lived in Rome as a Jewish Christian, you were considered part of the scattered, the stick of Joseph. Alrighty? But the Jewish church centered around Jerusalem where the temple was. Alrighty? So Peter had been writing from Jerusalem. Otherwise, it just wouldn't make sense. He could not have been writing from Rome. Alrighty? Because the Jewish perspective was the center of the world centered around Jerusalem. So if you click on the Britannica link here, Temple of Jerusalem, either of two temples, that's referring to Solomon or Herod temple, that were the center of worship and national identity in ancient Israel. That was the center of their worship, not Rome. Alrighty, so Peter could not have been writing from Rome. And then also Acts 8, you see the eunuch. Let's see here. But basically, where was he from? I don't remember. I read the stuff, and then years later I go over it, like, I went over this over a year ago. But it's in here in Acts 8. Let's see here. Yeah, you can easily find it. I'm trying to cut time in this video. But the eunuch actually comes from somewhere, and then he goes to Jerusalem, and that was the center of worship. Alrighty? So this is an example where somebody who... here we go. Ethiopia. Okay. Yep. So he was from Ethiopia, and he went to Jerusalem to worship, and he's going to go back. So this is an example using Scripture where Jerusalem at the center of the world. Alrighty. So anyway, Eusebius used it to make it appear more believable. Peter headed to Rome. Now remember, in his book 2, chapter 14, Eusebius claimed Peter fled to the west through the sea at the beginning of Claudius' reign, which was in AD 41. Okay? Most scholars date 1 Peter in the 60s, the first century, which was 20 years after the beginning of Claudius' reign. So if Peter was in Rome after he preached to them in person, then started with a letter referring to him as scattered, wouldn't that make Peter himself scattered from Jerusalem unless Rome was considered a center? So something to think about. Rome was never considered the center of the Jewish world. Jerusalem was, and that was where the temple was located. Also, which is it, Eusebius, did Peter flee to Rome through the sea like he claimed in 2 Peter chapter 14, or did he go through those 5 churches along the way, which is what you're now claiming in book 3, chapter 1? Which is it? Do you see the contradiction? So let's just take a look at the map here. So in yeah, so book 2, chapter 14, Eusebius claimed that Peter fled to Rome through the sea. Okay, through the sea. But now, in book 3, chapter 1, he's suggesting that he went through those 5 churches and then to Rome. Okay? So if we go over, go back to what he's saying, Peter appears to have preached through Pontus, Galatia, Bithynia, Cappadocia, and Asia, the 5 churches that Peter wrote to the Jews, which is correct, to the Jews, who were scattered abroad. He finally came to Rome and was crucified with his head downward. Okay? Yeah, so I hope you see the contradiction here. So anyway. And then he mentions in his last statement here that I quoted, this account was given by Origen in the 3rd book of the exposition of Genesis. So he was alive around 185 to 254. This is well after Peter's time. So it's not a first-hand eyewitness. And so here's somebody claiming that another person saw this. Let's see here. Saw this account, who could not even possibly have been there. I don't think Peter was alive around AD 200, especially since the scholars date for Peter around the 60s, as well as 2 Peter. And in 2 Peter, he mentions basically that he's not going to live much longer. I don't think that he means, I'm not going to live much longer, and then he ends up living another 140 years. When the average lifespan at the time was about 50 years, 40 to 50 years at the time. It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, and I point out here, or I wrote down, he is definitely not a first-hand eyewitness. Not a good idea to lean too much on someone's writings who was not even there. Better go by first-hand account that had not been modified nor tampered with. So I provide 3 links where I point out 185, 254. So we'll just click on link 1, for example. You can see right here. Okay, this one 185 to 253, not 254. So it varies a little bit from source. Yeah, so this one 254, and then this one 254 as well. So one says it ended in 253, and the other 2 said 254. But anyway, the point being is, this is just conventional wisdom. If they were not there, and then for Eusebius, who definitely was not yet there, what good is that so-called account if Origen wasn't even there? I don't know how you pronounce the name. It's Origen. But anyway, and by the way, I could not find their book, Exposition of Genesis, online. If you find it where it talks about the martyrdom of Paul in Rome, I would like to see it. I haven't spent too much time looking into it, but at the same time, again, he wasn't even there. Alrighty, so anyway, so hopefully you can see why, just another piece of the puzzle, why Eusebius is not a credible source, and too many people have been fooled by his works. All right, well, thank you very much, and I hope you have an awesome day.